Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 45. And Chapter 45 is about environmental protection, which is an area of the law that is very, very contentious and one that I find quite interesting. Mostly because, I asked the question before, can one person change something? And, a couple of great examples of it. Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, which changed the food industry, the meatpacking industry in the United States and eventually in the world. And then one person who often isn't recognized. Rachel Carson wrote a book in the 1960s, early 70s, late 60s, early 70s called Silent Spring, or Silent Springs, Silent Spring, I think, I don't remember, which really kind of put the idea of environmental protection in a lot of people's mind. Before then, people, just did as they did and weren't really thinking about those things for the most part. And that book really brought together a bunch of stuff. It brought awareness to environmental issues. And what's interesting, I had to read The Jungle in high school as part of like the required reading, like everybody in the state that I was taking that year of class in had to take. I'm trying to remember what year it was. I went to schools in so many different states that I took a state history thing 3 different times about each different state because someone did it at like 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, whatever. Anyway, so random thoughts. But anyway, no one or a lot of people haven't heard about Rachel Carson and how important her book was. And I think it's because some people still disagree or haven't gotten on board how important environmental ideas and protections are. So anyway, there's more concern about that now. And the law, it really relies basically saying that if you create stuff, bad stuff, you should be responsible for it. Makes sense, right? So, it's one of those things. It's people have a right to use their property reasonably, but anything that's unreasonable, that interferes with others' rights to enjoy their own property. And so, in public nuisances, when it comes to this, have gotten very controversial, and some people have taken them what I would consider probably too far. There's a couple of famous cases, and you can find some on YouTube. There was a gentleman who was barbecuing, grilling, charcoal fire with meat on the grill in their backyard, and their neighbors complained that they could smell it. And in that town, that was a nuisance, and they were producing bad, noxious smoke. So there was a complaint, and the environmental department for that town came out, said you can't do this, and fined them. I like to put meat on grill, and sorry, I don't think that's using things unreasonably. But that's a case. It happened. So, again, you can take this not far enough and maybe too far. Now, you may think that that is right. Good. That's okay. We just have to find as a society where we meet in the middle. I'll listen to both sides of an argument. So there are different liabilities as we go through this, and one thing that's becoming a new area, and you've probably seen. I watch a lot of late night TV because I don't sleep. The commercials about mesothelioma, and if you have mesothelioma, basically the only way you can get it is through asbestos, and so the people who use the asbestos are responsible. One of those things. Businesses that engage in ultra hazardous activities are liable for any of the injuries they cause. That's why, on the news the other day, there was a tractor-trailer truck carrying radioactive waste, and it overturned, or there was some kind of accident somewhere around Fayetteville. It was a huge deal. None of the containers broke, so luckily nothing leaked, no problems. But it was a huge deal because they would be liable because they're engaging in a pretty hazardous activity of transporting those goods. All right, so let's move on. So who's responsible? In the end, federal, state, and local governments all control different areas of the environment, and what should happen, and who should take place, and who can do what. There are different sections of federal law, and there are big statutes out there that govern certain things, in ocean dumping, safe drinking water. You can't put PCBs in the drinking water, stuff like that. The Endangered Species Act, which is a huge deal, which has driven me crazy. I had some land, I don't remember what word they used. They seized some of my property. I own a rather large farm because there was an endangered mussel that lived in one of the tributaries, one of the creeks that run through the property. So they seized the land on both sides of the property the government did, the state of North Carolina, and said, I can't use it, I can't modify it, I can't even walk on it because that's endangered muscle exists, which is very frustrating when you lose acres and acres of property to the government. And I probably didn't have the greatest opinion of the government when they did it. Now, I would say it's one of those not in my backyard things. Like if they did it to someone else, oh yeah, you need to do it, we got to save that. But when it impacts you, it hits a little bit differently. So the book mentions an interesting case. In 2016, a federal district court in Oregon allowed a lawsuit to go forward against the U.S. government for doing too little to control climate change. And it was Juliana versus the United States. And this went back and forth. A number of people said the government isn't doing enough to control climate change, and it's hurting me and hurting my kids because things will be terrible, and it's impacting my future. So it went back and forth in the courts, and finally the Ninth Circuit Court, which is usually a very liberal court, threw out the case and says, look, you can't prove that any one thing is impacting you in any particular way. And you can't also offer some kind of reasonable suggestion or way to stop this completely without altering society in irreparable and unacceptable ways. So the court just said, no, you don't have standing. There's nothing to sue here for because we can't prove that the government isn't doing enough, and you can't tell me what would be enough. So got thrown out of court. But it was a really interesting lawsuit, and I bet you we'll see stuff like this pop back up again in the future. All right, so the rest of the stuff, there's different violations of the Clean Air Act, Water Pollution Act, all those things. So read through the different types of law. I know certain parts of the pollution laws very, very well because in healthcare where I worked, we deal with radiation. We deal with medical waste. We deal with some of these things, and we have to make sure that it's treated appropriately. Some of the medicines we use are radioactive, and so we have to deal with how often the people giving those medicines are exposed, and the radiation techs, and talk about occupational exposure, what's acceptable, what's not, and so you learn in your area of work what's important. And I can't teach everyone everything right here, so look through it, read through it, understand, and kind of start thinking about what may be important in your career. And then chapter 46 and 47, I'll put up some short videos that explain those chapters as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I'll see you next week. Have a great day.